Everything has been going well on your end. Today I have a special treat. I have my husband
What
with
up?
me. Um, so, my husband and I have been married for 12 years,
12 years.
and we have been together for
Forever.
17,
17.
17 years, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
And so I had the idea of discussing relationships. A lot of the clients that I serve usually have questions about, um, communication and marriage and things of that nature. In no way am I saying that we are experts in the field because we are not. We are learning as we go along as well, but we do our best to make things work the way they should. So,
Absolutely.
we're going to go through our origin story, and then I will ask him a few questions about what it's like being married to a therapist, as well as some things about men and mental health and how that has been working for him, as well as just how we've been doing with trying to nourish our marriage, and grow after facing our own trauma histories. And excuse me, I'll let him kind of share some of that a little later. But let's start with in the good version of of how we met. Um, so I'll let him go first, so I can clean up where he's fibbing and telling stories.
well, excuse me. Welcome, everybody, to another episode with my wife, the therapist. Um, so it's strange, right? Because I think we always laugh about how we met, and the place that we met and what it looked like at that time. Like, they always say God has a purpose of putting you in a place um, where you don't really know what to expect, you know. Um, and it so happened that we were working at the same place. Um, Shout out to the Board of Child Care, which is no longer the Board of Child Care anymore, but to us will always be BCC. But Board of Child Care, where we have met many of people. And, you become a family. You're working with children in foster care now, adults and still navigating through life. And it just so happens that I was there for quite some time before my wife had started, working at the board. And while I was there, I went through my own experiences. And right before I had met my wife, it was just crazy and how it happened in passing. Every Thursday at the board, they would have cookouts, right? So
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays, was it Wednesdays? Oh
Yes,
yeah, Wednesdays.
Wednesdays.
Look at me. Um, so Wednesdays at the board, they would have these cookouts when the weather was nice. And they wanted the kids to be able to come out and eat outside of the cafeteria, which was a really nice area atmosphere. And I don't even think I even knew who my wife was at
You thought my name was Tiffany.
the time. So where I worked at on campus actually was, up the hill, what they called it. And that was with like transitional living and semi-independent living. And my wife was working in one of the cottages. And during this cookout, you get to see everybody who actually was working that day or that shift, and the kids, of course. However, I was down there. I had older kids at the time, and my kids were very selective on whether or not they wanted to attend these cookouts or they wanted to just stay at the house. And it just so happens that we ended up going, and as I'm helping them clean up the table, you know, I get up to take the trash, and I'm walking past this beautiful woman, and I noticed she had mustard on her pants, right? She had a big old mustard stain. Now, if you know my
I got a
wife,
hole in my lip.
yes, man, listen, will always get something on a shirt,
Yes.
anything. I don't care what color it is. But I was like, I was like, you got mustard on your pants, and this woman gave the craziest response. She was like, "Well, why don't you let me have yours?"
I'm shooting my shot.
So I'm like, hmm? Wh- which was very awkward because I don't even know who you are. And sometimes I can be a little green to the signs, I missed that
Right,
one.
right.
Um, because I was actually going through uh, a breakup with my ex at the time. So I was not interested in anything but my money, you know. And that was just how it ended. And we walked off. I went back and I just kept like laughing to myself, like, yeah, people out here weird. you know, um, and to kind of fast forward, we had some great coworkers. Um, shout out to my man Dave Cowser. Um,
Jamie Kibler.
yes, Jamie Kibler. They were very, very good friends of ours, who kind of like put this thing together. I got off work from working a double, and if anybody know how me and Dave Cowser got down, um, I think we always had like a mission. Our mission was always to be involved in something because we felt like we worked so hard that we deserved to have fun. And Dave called me one night, like, "What you doing?" And he tells me, this young lady wants to meet me, and she been, feeling me or whatever. And I'm like, huh? He like, yeah, Jamie putting it together. We gonna go up Fridays, have a few drinks. And I'm like, Dave, I just got off, bro. Like, I ain't trying to go nowhere. Like, I'm in a house. And at the time I was in the video games, through the Madden on, and he like, I'm in your driveway. I'm like, what? Look outside. This dude, Gaza, man, is really outside the driveway. So I had no choice but to throw something on, and we end up going, and voila, one night turns into 17 years later. So yeah, that's how that started.
He did good. He did good. Because usually he does extra ad libs and things of that nature. But yeah, so it was obviously ordained for us to meet, and we, of course, had to continue to work to keep the relationship. So, um, what he didn't mention is that I was in school for social work when he met me. And so, he kind of helped me through that process.
Mhm.
And so now, years later, I am full throttle into therapy part time for right now. And it takes a lot. It's very draining sometimes, and you have to be able to protect not only your peace, but your space and set firm boundaries. So I know that a few times within our relationship, there was discussion about me pouring so much into my clients and assisting them through their life changes. And sometimes my boo felt a little neglected. And so
Excuse me.
I wanted to have him kind of just talk about what that means to him, and how he navigated that, and then how he also um, tried to support me when I felt like my head was spinning,
Mhm.
trying to manage being a mother, a wife, a woman, a daughter. So all those different roles that some women may play. So
Yeah. So I will say in the beginning, when you first get in a relationship with someone, it's fun. It's fresh. It's refreshing. Um, and it's like being a kid. Those are some of the things that I felt like attracted me to my wife at the time. Was being able to be on the phone, have conversations, stuff that kind of reminded me of when I was young. So when we first got together, a lot of times we spent, either coming and going. Of course, we seen each other at work, but like she mentioned, she was in school, so there would be early mornings of her driving to DC to go to school, and stand between my house and hers at the time. But when things start to pick up, we had always my wife was very straightforward about what she wanted when we first met, which also was like for me, it was like, wow, like you already know all of this and you basically speaking it into fruition. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, I ain't nowhere near where you at right now, and speaking that into existence. But things work out in your favor. And, we ended up, dating for quite some time. Then, had Brooklyn, um, in 2010, and then turn right around and have Skylar in 2012, and then be married a year later. Things happen so fast, but it's like we always talk about spending those times together, and what we were able to do. And she's always reminded me, like, we it's not just us anymore. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But it's a blessing, man, and being in that position to have kids and find your soulmate. But listen, man, it takes a lot of work. A lot of work. Um, there's a lot of joy, pain, um, tears, um, prayer. There's a lot that goes into the foundation of what you created. Um, and you gotta, I told my man this recently, on his wife's birthday. It's like, man, you gotta protect your investment. When you pour into somebody and you pouring everything into, your union, you gotta figure out a way to make it work. I think a lot of people are always looking at our situation, like, what's the couple that was on Why Do We Get Married, that everybody with Janet Jackson and Malik Gilbert, everybody would think like that was the perfect couple because you show so much on the outside that looks good, but a lot of people don't know what's going on the inside. And the inside, it's a lot, man. I always tell people when you get married, imagine that person that you say or you want to say I do to, and says, okay, I'm going to come up to you. I'm going to show up to your house with everything that I have in life, and you open your front door and everything that they had in their life, um, is with them, you know. And I'm not just talking about physical things, baggage, luggage, shoes, clothes, all of that stuff. No, I'm talking about everything, trauma, um, what the love, neglect, whatever you can think about, imaginable. So, yeah, that was it's been a journey, but however, being with a therapist specifically has taught me a lot, because I've been in mental health for what 20 plus years, and typically I feel like when you get in the field, you are following the footsteps, of why God placed you there, right? And I always wanted to help kids, and meeting somebody whose mission was to do the same thing, if not greater, and then expanding their knowledge and education on what they want to know about the field and do more in the field. It was eye opening to me and always refreshing. Shout out to all my therapists out there and everybody working in the mental health field, man. It's amazing, what we do.
Yep. And I just want to kind of echo what he said. Like, being in a relationship, being in a committed relationship, I should say, is um, like just showing up with all your shit, and you like, who, who is this? But it's also like putting a huge mirror in front of you, and making you challenge yourself to deal with your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
Along
you'll
with dealing with somebody else's, right? Because you know you got it ain't just stuff no more. What you say is your shit, my shit together.
it's
So
ours.
it's
We
ours.
move from I to we.
Yeah, remember that. Remember that process of going through that where we had to like really tell ourselves, like my wife would be like, well, I got this, I gotta pay for it, or I gotta do this, and I'd be like, nah,
Yeah.
we,
Now
your bills is
listen,
mine.
it took me some time. Okay, it took me some time. I grew up in a home where the woman, what probably most of you, was most dominant, right? And so most of you know that I've shared before. My dad passed away when I was, fairly young, and so my mother was the quote unquote sole provider, and so she took on a lot of responsibilities while juggling her addiction. And in that process, I had a praying grandmother, right? And my grandmother was um, separated from my grandfather due to alcoholism and domestic violence. And so I was used to not depending on folks because um, I learned at an early age that the only person that I could depend on was me. But then here comes this gentleman who is trying to um, help me to depend on other people and show me that we can't do life alone, which I always tell you guys, um, that we're always meant to connect to someone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a husband. It could be a friend, like it could be a coworker, it could be anyone that shares some sort of like mind or kindred spirit. And so, yes, it is a lot going from I to we. So, um, I think the biggest thing that I took away from our experience is one, we had to be very encouraging to each other. Um, there are a lot of times that, he doubted himself, I doubted myself, but we continued to push and support and also learn from our parents on what we did not want. And so I'll let him kind of share with you the type of household that he grew up in and how that kind of affected some of the things that we were trying to do together.
Yeah. So typically with my story is I grew up in a household that was pretty much together, for the most part. Um, Me, my mom, my dad, and my sister, so when I always tell people when I reflect on the dynamics of my household, I remember a lot of good times, a lot of good times. But I think that we as a people sometimes tend to reflect on the negative because the negative was such a trying time in that household that it does create a form or of trauma, and um, at the time growing up, I'm 8 years apart from my sister. She's older than me, so I can remember all the good moments. But once I feel like my sister got to a transition of high school and got a group of friends and started working, you know, that kind of like it kind of changed. But I knew that was going to happen because it's only so much that she's gonna remain kids, right? So, but yeah, she wasn't really home as much, um, and she was also preparing herself to go to college. And which I thought was like a great moment, in which it is, because I was happy for my sister. I mean, when we walked on the campus of Lincoln, I felt like, oh, this is where it's at. Like, oh, I'm definitely one day going to college. I didn't know if I was going there, but I knew I was going. And my mom and dad were like going through it, and a lot of times when you're young, you don't really realize it, So there was some physical abuse. There was, a lot of verbal. Um, not necessarily towards me. Of course, I caught your natural ass whipping. I think that every black parent, or grandparent, or
Not
somebody.
I didn't speak
Well,
for
I did. Listen. I'm gonna speak for the men out there because I know the women, y'all avoided some of that, but men a lot. It was always that stigma of toughen up, or why are you doing that? I felt like the parents were a little bit more harsh on us if something went down in our household. We spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house as well. So that was a collective of males and females at the time. But in my household specifically, I grew up in Woodlawn, and being there, it was community driven. So everything, I felt like it was a black early community part of Baltimore County. And once that dynamic shifted in my house, started like being rebellious. It went from us four to just me and my mother, right? So to me, I didn't really have that same connection um, to family outside of when we went to my grandmother's house. But I spent a lot of time outside, whether it was sports related, or something negative, just getting into regular, everyday, average stuff because we were bored. Um, but I started doing things that would get me in trouble. Um, and I almost can say now that I felt like some of it was attention seeking, um, to kind of get my parents to see like what's going on, or really try to tap in. But we always talk about growing up in the black communities, the stigma on therapy, and how a lot of people stayed away from it because it was so judgmental. You were either looked at as if you got a problem, you was, slow or something like that. And I'm like, wow, you like really? But nah, it's serious. Mental health is serious. And I went through it, and my parents separated, and I went through that whole challenge of me resenting my father for you know, um, what he did to my mom. But it didn't take me until I became a man. Well, I felt like I became a man at 21 to sit down and have a conversation with my father about that. And the one thing I always told myself going into that was I was looking for accountability, and he gave me that, and shout out to him. Addiction is real too. He got rid of his addiction to alcohol, and has become a changed man. So, I'm appreciative for that, and the transparency, man. Sometimes we need that, because as kids, we hold our parents to a high standard, um, because they're the first person that you're gonna love. They're your first everything. So, like that was big for me, and I brought a lot of that over into my marriage. Um, I'm riding high. I'm young. I think I know what I want. For sure, I know what I want. However, you get in and you still have questions. Questions about, did you make the right decision? Is this what you want forever? Um, what is it about me that is causing, disruption in my household or in my marriage? And sometimes it's not just about what it is you're doing, is what you're not doing. And I think that's a big, big part in what we have built right now.
no, I definitely can agree. Um, but as you can see, like our own upbringings triggered certain things within each other. And so he was used to being outside, he was used to hanging with his friends, um, smoke pretty heavily, drink pretty heavily. And that kind of triggered some things in me because my dad was an alcoholic, and my mother also suffered from her own addiction. So that would frustrate me and make me angry, and which in turn I would put my hands on him, which reminded him of his household, and then I would say mean things to him, which again reminded him of his household. And so it was by maybe year 7
Mhm.
that we were married, that we decided to go into therapy because I don't know about him, but my thoughts were like, I ain't doing this no more. I'm ready to get that D word, like I should say, let's sign them papers.
Ditto.
And so I said, well, if that's the route we're going, we need to at least we owe it to ourselves to give it, give counseling a try to see if there's something we could do. Again, something different
Mm,
from our parents, because most generations prior would just kind of stick it out, or they would walk away completely. And I think that was a turning point for us to understand each other's trauma and how we communicated. He is very boisterous, very talkative. I need time to get my thoughts together. I know I'm a therapist, but um, I was not big on talking things out. I would text you, I would, do passive aggressive things, but it was never like face to face communication. And so since then, we have been able to communicate more,
great.
and express how we feel more. And I think we've also kind of matured in our marriage.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that once we got to the physical part, I think that was like the turning point for both of us, right? Because um, as a man, I watched physical abuse, so I'm like, I don't ever feel like that is going to solve anything, right? Um, and I feel like once we got to that point, and I'm almost tempted to do something or act in that way, then I don't need it at all, So like we gotta fix this thing, because I'm 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Like we gotta fix this. Like, nah, that can't be our way of always reacting to a situation that we dislike, or a situation that we don't approve of, because it's not meeting us or it's not fulfilling us. Because again, it's not about you, it's about it's about both of y'all. So it's just finding out what we can do to kind of change that. And I mean, therapy at the time, um, that we did it, couples therapy, marriage therapy, whatever you want to call it. It was huge, because I think we both kind of like mutually decided, like, yeah, that's the plan.
we need
Like that's
this.
the plan. Like nothing else even matters. Like yeah, let's do that because at this point, yeah, what you need me sign. You know what I mean? But yeah, and shout out to that. I mean, we did that, and unfortunately, COVID hit, right? And when COVID hit, it kind of shut it down. I think we were going like maybe every Sunday.
Mhm.
I think, and when we got into it, they, I'm going in with the mindset of thinking it's going to be a certain way, and immediately we get hit with starting from the beginning of your childhood,
Mhm.
and building that timeline, and then building that timeline. Man, you want to talk about some moments of clarity, like yo, like this shit real, like okay. So that's where that stemmed from, and yeah, unfortunately, like I said, when COVID hit, it kind of stopped it, but for myself, I can't necessarily speak for her, but for myself, I felt like I had taken away enough information from those sessions that would help me, right? And unfortunately, I wasn't 100% accurate, however, it did help, in certain instances, and we still had work to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, still
Yep.
had work to do.
Yeah, I think it became real when I would stick with the ultimatum. Um, so like you said, we thought we walked away with enough. It worked for a while, but then we still had things that we needed to work out on an individual
Hmm.
basis, right? And
Right.
so um, we went to Tennessee. We had a little disagreement. I was told seek therapy or he was leaving. And so my mindset was, I ain't trying to be by myself. Um, and also I was tired, right? And so mental health is a personal journey, but you have to get to a point, just like with addiction, where you're tired and you want to do something different. And so his conversation ultimatum was just kind of sparked for me. And so I did find a therapist. Yes, I'm a therapist who has a therapist. I believe that all therapists,
You all need therapists.
every person should have someone
Don't be against it.
to talk to,
Yes.
and not just your homie. And not saying anything is wrong with talking to your
Yeah.
pastor, because I think that is great. But I also feel like you need that professional opinion, and not all therapists are good, so you
Mhm.
may have to shop
Neither
around.
is your parents, because they still ain't healed. All right.
so, so I feel like you need to shop around for therapists, if that's something that you seek. So, but then in turn, some more things kind of started happening with him, and then I kind of hit him with an ultimatum, as far as seeking counseling. So I wanted him to kind of just talk about what it's like to be a black man, dealing with mental health and doing therapy. I mean, we talked about the benefit of marriage, but that
Yeah.
was for both of us. It's a little different when you go on an individual level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a black man, that journey is important, man. Because like I said, you have so much past trauma, but I remember telling my wife one time, like, do you know what it's like to be a black man? Because we constantly are reminded about women and what women go through, right? But as a black man, I think going out here and showing up every day, because you have a family that you know that you want to protect and be a provider for. So those things were important, but I had already gone through so much, with alcohol, with drugs, with um, just like having. I don't want to say I was addicted to sex, but hey, sex, um, and so much other stuff, like just being out there. But as you get older, things start happening to your body, right? And my body wasn't, you know, standing as strong as it was at one point. So I had some health concerns at one point, which was kind of a little scary for me, but also for my wife too. So I knew that I wanted better for myself, because I fluctuate so much with trying to be the better version of myself. Even though I know what I need to do to protect myself. But therapy is important, man. It's been helpful. Um, Working with therapists has been helpful. Because anybody know me, I'm a very transparent person. Like I don't hold back nothing. I'm cool with almost everybody I know.
Everybody.
Not everybody, I mean,
Everybody.
but majority of the people, Um, but in that instance, I knew how important it was for me to be able to have somebody I could talk to. Um, and don't get me wrong, like I said, it's always cool to chop it up with your homie and talk about some things, but they don't always have an answer because sometimes, to be honest with you, they going through it themselves.
Mhm.
So I look at it like that's a good support system to have, but therapy is important because it's a judgment free zone, and I feel like you have a person who is there to do a job, and that job is to help you find ways to be the greater version of yourself. Shout out to my man Rashid. But um, but yeah, and working in this field has introduced me to so many amazing people who are not only therapists, but are social workers, um, what you call them, career, workforce development, you name it. And I've come in contact with so many people that every day I would hear different situations and stories about what people were going through. But as black men, yeah, it's real. A lot of my homies, they've been through divorce, separation, abusive relationships, um, and dealing with addictions. And the sad part about it, I think, is the children suffer more than we do.
Mhm.
And I think that's always a thing for us. Growing up in my community and trying to be a black man, our community was like pretty much tight. There weren't many fathers, but the ones that were around, oh, they were definitely prominent people who we looked up to and respect. Um, and now as we got older, I think that's something that we always told ourselves is that we want to be great parents.
Mhm.
You know, now we don't always make great choices and who the other parent gonna
No,
be,
no, we don't.
but hey, it is what it is at this point. But yeah, it's tough, as a black man. But I do highly recommend that all black men and men of any race and women of any race, get some therapeutic help, man. You'll see. It don't do it for anybody. Do it for yourself.
Mhm.
More than anything. I always tell my wife in this new season, you got to do it for yourself. Discipline. Nobody's going to hold you more accountable than yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the other piece to that is too, like therapy doesn't always have to be when something's going wrong, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes you just need somebody to bounce ideas off of, like you say, in that non-judgmental way,
Hmm.
to help you. Always like every client I talk to is like, oh, I never thought about it that way, right? And so it's just having that different perspective in life. And my husband and I are always saying, like, life doesn't come with a manual, right? There's no book on how to parent, there's no book on how to be married, there's no book on how to do life, or how to choose a career or whatever the case may be. And so, we make stuff up as we go along.
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't always make the best decisions,
Yeah.
but
Well, we improv. We improv. We always talking to my daughter, who's the youngest, who's in drama club, right? And the one thing I'm big on is improv. When sometimes when you want to be on that stage or in front of people, you're not gonna always remember everything. And I feel like in life, you're just not gonna always remember. In a marriage, you're not gonna always remember. As a parent, you're not gonna always remember. You're not gonna always know either. So it's good, man. Build you a village because we all need it.
yeah. So, um, hopefully, this has been helpful for you all. We just kind of wanted to take a little time to shed some light into our relationship,
Yeah.
because, like he said, like, people think everything is great over here,
Oh man.
and and it is it's not sometimes.
It hey, in real life it is though. You know why? Cause we always believed in one thing, and the Lord Almighty is always taking care of us, no matter what. I don't care how dark it got, how much we had to weather the storm. Even in our most vulnerable moments, it showed up, and we worked through it.
Yeah,
Continue to work. It's a never ending thing. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like you're gonna have to work the rest of your life for this. It ain't like, all right, we got to a point, and don't always think this either that money is going to solve all of your problems because it's not. Okay, as a temporary band aid. You know what I mean? And
sometimes it heightens your
what? Say that again?
problems. Sometimes it heightens it.
Yes, it does.
Um,
Yes, it does.
but I think the biggest thing is we continue to choose each other, right? And so that's the key. I would say, in addition to communication, in addition to being transparent and aware of your own stuff, is that we continue to choose each other. Like, I'm not trying to start over.
It doesn't start over.
I don't
How
want
many people out there know me and I tell them all the time? What I tell them? This train go
to.
one way. You hear me? One way.
So,
And when it stops, that's it. I ain't getting back on
so,
it.
so yeah, that's real. Um, and so these are our confessions.
Yeah,
I want to thank my husband for joining me today.
absolutely.
Um, we will probably have, more things that will come on and chat about. If there's some topics that you want us to talk about, based on like the experiences that we've had, let us know. Um, we can always get on here and chat it up.
Yes.
Um, if you have any mental health questions, please feel free to either email, inbox. Um, again, Resilient Counseling and Consultation LLC. You can follow on YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, and I also have a website. So I thank you all for your time. It's been real. Peace.
Dude's La Familia. Yeah, no.